Thank you again so much for being here. At this time, we are so honored to have with us Dr. Frank Turek, author or co-author of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Would you please welcome to the stage Dr. Frank Turek?
Ladies and gentlemen, what I am going to say this morning is extremely controversial. Anytime you call something, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, it's going to be controversial, especially in our culture today. So it's absolutely critical that you listen closely, because I don't want you walking out of here thinking I said something I did not say. If you don't listen closely, the results can be disastrous. Now, if you can't keep up, not a problem. You can get the book on the book table. There's a 12-part DVD set which goes through this entire presentation in a lot more detail than what we can do here this morning. There's also a curriculum, there's workbooks, and by the way, all the proceeds from the sale of the books, the DVDs, the curriculum, will go to feed needy children. Mine. Okay, just so you know. I've got 3 sons, so I need some help. Actually, we've just got the last one out of the house this week. The oldest 2 are in the Air Force. I was in the Navy. They went into the Air Force. Their grandfather was a test pilot in the Air Force, so they're actually serving right now. And if I told you where they were, I'd have to kill you. The 3rd son, we just moved to Birmingham, Alabama a few days ago, so my wife and I are empty nesters. Yeah, it took us a while to get used to that. About 10 minutes. Yeah, that's how long it took to change the locks. Do we have any empty nesters in here? Woo, look at them all. They're all up front going, woo, yeah, we got here on time. We didn't have to drag kids here. It was easy. The house is clean. You notice how clean the house stays when they're gone? I mean, we love our kids. We have great kids, but they're a little bit messy. I got an email not long ago from a United States Marine. I was in the Navy. He was in the Marine Corps. And by the way, Navy stands for Never Again Volunteer Yourself. I don't know if you know that, but... Anyway, he was writing me not as a tough guy. He was actually writing me as a distraught father. He said, my daughter was the top Christian student in her high school class. She helped lead the youth group at church. She won several scholarships from Christian organizations that she could take to any college she wanted to. She wanted to go to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill to win the campus for Christ, and it needs to be one for Christ. So we sent her off there. He said about 4 weeks into the semester, I got a phone call from her. Her words devastated me. She said, Dad, I don't believe in God anymore. Don't believe in God anymore? What? He said, I got in my car. I drove 4 hours all the way to Chapel Hill. I sat down with her, and I got nowhere with her. What do you mean you don't believe in God anymore? What happened? And she said, well, you know, I've got a college or a professor now who teaches New Testament, and he's an atheist. Yes, the atheists teach the New Testament classes. And he says, we don't even know who wrote the Gospels, and there are errors in the Bible, so Dad, look, I'm an atheist now. He said, is there anything I can do about this, Frank? I said, have you ever gotten her any apologetics training? That's not saying you're sorry. That actually comes from 1 Peter 3:15, always ready to give an answer. The Greek word there means to give a defense, not to apologize, but to give a defense. Have you ever gotten her any evidence that Christianity is true? He said, you know, I wanted to do that, but I just never got around to it. He said, is there anything I can do now? I said, well, you could ask her a question. And by the way, this is the question I ask all unbelievers. The question is this: if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? I said, if she hesitates at all, the problem isn't just here, the problem is here. She might not want it to be true. And when you go to college, there's a number of factors that conspire against belief in God. They're not all intellectual. One of them, of course, is you're out on your own for the first time. You don't want to do everything your parents said, right? You want to be your own person. And you want to fit in with everybody else. You don't want to be seen as the Bible thumper on campus. And you certainly don't want to be the target of those atheistic college professors who, by the way, are 5 times more likely to be atheists than the general public. So there's a number of factors that conspire against belief in God. However, I will say this. If this young woman had known the material we're going to go through today, while she could still walk away from the faith and still walk away from the church if she wanted to, it would be much more difficult if she knew why Christianity was true, to walk away. I mean, it's easy to walk away from something you've doubted your whole life. It's a lot more difficult to walk away from something you know beyond a reasonable doubt is true. And I actually don't think it's all that difficult to show that Christianity is true. You only have to answer 4 questions in the affirmative to show that Christianity is true. Let's start here at, does truth exist? Does truth exist? And whenever you're talking about truth, you always have to start with Jack Nicholson. Right? I mean, Tom Cruise had him on the witness stand, and he said to him, Colonel, I want the truth. And Nicholson said,
I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Well, there's a lot of people out there who can't handle the truth. They're saying, you got your truth, I got my truth, there is no truth, all truth is relative. Well, what we're going to talk about here in the next 5 minutes might be the most important thing we're going to talk about all day. And that is because we're going to talk about one key law of logic that if you master, it will make you an absolutely fearless apologist, somebody who defends the faith. This might be the most important thinking skill I've ever learned. I did not know this until I was 33 years old in seminary, and I had already had a master's degree, to show you how silly and stupid I was, until I came to Southern Evangelical Seminary in Charlotte and actually learned what is called the law of non-contradiction. In fact, I knew the law of non-contradiction, I just didn't know I knew it. And to demonstrate this, I want to put up a statement here that we hear in our culture quite a bit. And let me see if you guys can figure out the problem with it. If somebody says this, there is no truth, you should ask that person a question. What should the question be? Yes, you guys are an astute audience. You simply say, hey, is that true? Is it true that there is no truth? Because if it's true that there is no truth, the claim there is no truth can't be true, but it claims to be true. Did I say that right? Do you see that this is a self-defeating statement? It doesn't meet its own standard. It can't be true. It violates the law of non-contradiction. What is a self-defeating statement other than this? Well, a self-defeating statement would be something like, I can't speak a word in English. Right? That would be a self-defeating statement. I'm using English to say it. Or a self-defeating statement in a practical way might be, my parents had no kids that lived. Or, my brother is an only child. Or, everything I say is a lie. Some of you will get that tomorrow. Or, all generalizations are false. Some of you will never get that one. My son has a self-defeating statement. This is his favorite self-defeating statement. You'll have to think about this one for a minute. He says, Hitler wasn't such a bad guy. After all, he killed Hitler. How about this? You hear this a lot. There's no such thing as absolute truth. If somebody says there's no such thing as absolute truth, you should ask that person a question. What should the question be? Yeah, is that absolutely true? Or are you absolutely sure? Right? Once again, you look like a super genius. This is my favorite one right here. It's true for you, but not for me. Well, Christianity may be true for you, but Buddhism's true for me. If someone ever says that to you, what should you ask them? Close. This is also self-defeating. It's just a little bit more subtle. If somebody says it's true for you, but not for me, say, hey, is that true for everybody? Is true for you, but not for me, true for everybody? Because if true for you, but not for me is true for everybody, then true for you, but not for me can't be true because it's true for everybody. Did I say that right? I know that can give you intellectual constipation if you think about it long enough. But that's because it's self-defeating. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English. Actually, there's a more fun way of dealing with this. If somebody says it's true for you, but not for me, say, sure, go try that with your bank teller. Yeah, go to your bank teller one day and say, look, the economy's down, I need a little extra money. I'd like $100,000 out of my account. The bank teller looks at your account and says, I'm sorry, you only have $16.04 in your account. It's easy to get the money. You simply say, that's true for you, but not for me. Give me the $100,000. Are you going to get the money? No, if it's true there was only $16.04 in your account, that's true for all people at all times and all places when referring to your account at that time. It's just true. I go to a lot of churches, and I normally will ask them, hey, do you believe the Bible is true? And most people will, of course, say yes. And then I'll say, well, why do you think it's true? Do you know what answer I get more than any other? Because I have faith. Is that a good answer? Does your faith change whether or not this book is true? Does your faith change whether or not God exists or Jesus rose from the dead? No, your faith doesn't change a thing about those things. I mean, do you have to believe something to make it true? Do you have to believe in gravity to stay on the ground? The people who don't believe in gravity float away. Hey, look, there's another one. Hey, if you believe, you'll come back. No, that's not the way it works. You say, well, why is the Bible always talking about faith then? Because there's two kinds of faith. There's belief that, and then there's belief in. Belief that is getting evidence that God exists, that Jesus rose from the dead, that the Bible is true. That's evidence. That's apologetics. That's what we use. We use apologetics to try and figure out if belief that is reasonable. That's a matter of the head or the mind. But then there's belief in. Belief in is after you know that it's true, trust in Christ for your salvation. James, the half-brother of Jesus, who wrote that little book called James in the New Testament, says, even the demons believe that God exists, but they tremble. You see, they know intellectually better than we do that God exists, but they don't trust in him. Why? Because they don't want to. That's why when you ask people the question, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? A lot of times you're going to get the answer, no. The issue isn't the intellect, the issue is the will. They want to do their own thing. They don't want there to be a God. Now, there is no evidence at all for belief in. There's only evidence for belief that. After you know that it's true, then trust in Christ for your salvation. That's a matter of the will. In fact, to demonstrate the difference between belief that and belief in, when I first met my wife about 29 years ago, I got evidence that she would be a good wife. But all the evidence in the world didn't make her my wife. I had to take a step of trust in her to ask her to be my wife. And in a momentary lapse of judgment, she said yes. You see, that's the difference between belief that and belief in. In fact, the better word in today's society should be, instead of faith, it should be trust. Because that's really what it literally means in the Greek, trust. After you know that Jesus is the Savior, trust in him for your salvation. Most of the time when the Bible's talking about faith, it's talking about the second kind. Trust in. Trust in. It's not belief without evidence, it's belief in the evidence. After you know that it's true, then trust in Christ. It's belief on account of the evidence. Okay, so that's the difference between belief that and belief in. Don't let anyone tell you you have blind faith. No, you don't. You believe because you have evidence that it's true, and then you've taken a step of trust in Christ to be saved. In fact, I had a debate with an atheist a couple of years ago at the University of Michigan, and we had a chance to question one another. His name was Eddie Tabash. He was a Beverly Hills attorney, and the question he asked me was this. He said, my mom was a survivor of the Holocaust. She escaped the concentration camp, but she had a life full of suffering. Before she died, somebody offered her the gospel, and she rejected it. Frank, is she in hell right now? Wow, Eddie knows how to ask a tough question, right? Especially in front of a secular audience. So I said, Eddie, I don't know where your mother is now. I don't know if she had a deathbed conversion or not. But if she did not trust Christ before she died, then God is too loving to force her into heaven against her will. You see, the assumption is everybody wants to go to heaven. That is not true. Who's in heaven? Jesus. There are people spending their entire lives running from Jesus right now. If they don't want him now, they're not going to want him in eternity. So, what's the truth? There's a lot more in the book on this, but what's the truth about truth? The truth about truth is that contrary beliefs are possible, but contrary truths are not possible. You can believe everything's true. You can believe the earth's flat if you want. It won't make it flat. But everything can't be true. And objective truths can't be denied without being affirmed. Suppose you run into somebody who says, there are no objective truths. What should you say to them? Yeah, simply say, hey, is that an objective truth? Again, apply the claim to itself. If they say it is an objective truth, then they've defeated their own position. If they say, no, it's just my subjective opinion, you ought to say, well, then why should I believe it, right? If it's just in you, the subject, why should I believe it, right? So it's quite obvious there is truth out there. It's self-defeating to say there isn't. There's just one problem with truth. Actually, it's not a real problem with truth. It's a problem with us. Pascal put it very well. He said, people almost invariably arrive at their beliefs not on the basis of proof, but on the basis of what they find attractive. In other words, a lot of people are just believing what they find attractive. They're not looking into the evidence to see if it's true. They just like some sort of belief system that makes them feel comfortable. Now, by the way, this is what happens sometimes when I go to a college campus where I spend most of my time, and I don't have enough faith to be in atheist seminars. You always get a lot of atheists showing up. And during the Q&A, sometimes you'll get a little pushback, a little hostility, so I'll ask the atheist, I'll say, wait, before we go any further, can I ask you a question? Yeah, sure, go ahead. If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? On 3 occasions in the past few years, I've had atheists yell back at me, No! No, why are you here then? Why don't we just go have pizza, right? Wait, you claim to be an atheist. You claim to be a beacon of reason. Never mind if atheism's true, reason doesn't exist. Why? Because if atheism is true, if we're just molecules in motion, we're not really reasoning anyway, we're just reacting. But let's leave that aside. I ask you, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? And you say no? How's that reasonable? It's not. Because the problem really isn't here, the problem's here. They find something about atheism that they find attractive and they're clinging to it. In fact, after one of these sessions, I was up in Michigan. One atheist just admitted it's morality. I don't want to live under God's morality. And that quite frequently is the case. I had the opportunity to debate Christopher Hitchens a couple times. He's a new atheist who tragically died a couple of years ago. Very witty British guy, very intelligent. And since he had a British accent, that made him sound even more intelligent. You can see the debates for free on our website. But Hitchens was just angry. You could tell he was angry with God, which is why I summed up his book. I said, you could sum up Christopher Hitchens' book in one sentence. Here it is. There is no God, and I hate him. Now, this is a double-edged sword. Why? Because a lot of Christians just are believing in Christianity because they find it attractive. That they think there's a God up there who cares about them, and when they die, they're going to be with him and their loved ones. Now, thankfully, you can be right about something and not know why. So that's the case, I think, with Christianity. But we ought to know why we believe what we believe. In fact, it's commanded in the Bible. It's not an option. That's why it's great that all of you are here this morning to talk about these issues. It's very difficult, unfortunately, to get many churches interested in apologetics. You guys are the big exception, so thank you so much for being here this morning. So it is true that there is truth. It's self-defeating to say it doesn't exist. And if our reasoning is good to this point, we've just defeated what is called relativism and postmodernism. Okay? Truth exists. The question we now have to ask is it true that God exists? So let's move into question 2. And when we talk about God, we need to explain what we mean by God. We're talking about a theistic God. That's a being who's beyond the world, who created the world and sustains the world. A theistic God is to the universe and is to you as, say, a band is to music. If there was a band up here, which will be playing here tomorrow, they're playing the music. As soon as they stop, what happens to the music? Music's over. Same thing is true about God. God is not a creator God who creates the universe and then leaves it. That's deism. God creates the universe and then sustains it, and is sustaining the universe and you and me right now. That's the kind of God we're talking about. And when we say you're made in the image of God, what does that mean? Doesn't mean you look like God, because God is not a physical being. It means you're a person like God, that you have mind, emotion, and will. And his attributes of mind, emotion, and will are on you. They're on me. They're on human beings. That's what we mean by made in the image of God. Now, what is the evidence that this God actually exists? We're going to talk about 3 arguments. 2 of them have scientific evidence behind them. 1 is more philosophical in nature. The first argument is the argument for the beginning of the universe, known as the cosmological argument. And this is the argument that says that if the universe had a beginning, it must have had a beginner. The second argument is the argument from design, known as the teleological argument. It says if the universe is designed and you are designed, there must be a designer. Again, these are arguments that have scientific evidence behind them. The third argument, however, is more philosophical in nature, yet it's the argument we've all known since we were very small children. And it's the argument from morality known as the moral argument. And it says that there's one thing morally wrong out there, like it's wrong to torture babies for fun, or it's wrong to murder 6 million people in a Holocaust, then there has to be a God. Why? Because if there is no God, if there is no authoritative moral standard beyond humanity, then that's just your opinion against, say, Hitler's opinion. Or that's just your opinion against the baby torturer's opinion. You see, if there's no standard beyond humanity, everything's just reduced to personal preference. And we all understand there are certain things that are really right and other things that are really wrong. If that's the case, God exists. But let's start here at point one, the cosmological argument. And this is the argument that many say points back to the big. Now, some of you are going, Frank, we're Christians from Oklahoma. We don't believe in the Big Bang. You guys don't believe in the Big Bang? I believe in the Big Bang. I just know who banged it. In fact, the evidence for the Big Bang is indeed quite good. You even have atheistic scientists admitting this. For example, Stephen Hawking, an atheistic scientist, says almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Now, Hawking tries to come up with another explanation for how space, time, and matter came into existence out of nothing, but even he admits that the evidence is there that space, time, and matter had a beginning. Alexander Vilenkin, a Russian cosmologist who's an agnostic, put it this way: with the proof now in place, cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is now no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. Now, Vilenkin believes in the multiverse, that there are many universes out there, but even he admits this, that even if there are other universes out there which we can't detect, he says the whole show, all the universes together, need an absolute beginning. So he admits that there has to be a beginning to the universe. He'll try and come up with another explanation other than God, but the evidence is what he admits. Now, what is the evidence that is having these and other scientists admitting that space, time, and matter had a beginning? All this scientific evidence is in the book, chapter 3. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. I don't have time to go through the details here this morning. I'm just going to list the evidence so you'll have something to think about. And then when you get the book, it'll be much easier to go through. It's in an acronym, SURGE, S-U-R-G-E. Each letter stands for another line of evidence. The S stands for the second law of thermodynamics. The U stands for the fact that the universe is expanding. The R stands for the radiation afterglow. That's the remnant heat from the initial Big Bang explosion. It was discovered by two scientists working at Bell Labs in Holmdel, New Jersey, back in 1965. They won Nobel Prizes for that. The G stands for the great galaxy seeds. Those are very fine temperature variations in the radiation afterglow that, according to the theory, allowed the galaxies to form. And E stands for Einstein's theory of general relativity, which showed beyond any reasonable doubt that space, time, and matter are correlative, that they came into existence together. Now, again, all the details are in the book as to why this shows the universe had a beginning. But it's really not controversial that the universe had a beginning. What's the controversial part is what caused the universe to have a beginning, okay? This led this man, Robert Jastrow, an agnostic astronomer, to write a book called God and the Astronomers back in the late 70s, which he updated back in 1992. He said this in his book, and on page 1 of the book he says, I'm an agnostic on religious matters, meaning, look, I don't know whether God exists or not, but here's what he writes in the book. The astronomical evidence leads to a biblical view of the origin of the world. The essential element in the astronomical and biblical accounts of Genesis is the same. He went on in an interview to say that there are what I or what anyone would call supernatural forces at work is now, I think, a scientifically proven fact. Now, why would an agnostic astronomer say it's scientifically proven that supernatural forces are at work? Why couldn't nature have created the universe? Because nature was created. Nature's the effect. Nature can't be the cause. There was no nature. There was no space, matter, or time, or more properly, space, time, or matter. There was nothing. What is nothing? Aristotle had a good definition of nothing. He said, nothing is what rocks dream about. That's nothing. No space, no matter, no time. It wasn't just Jastrow who said these kind of things. Every one of these gentlemen has won Nobel Prizes in physics. None of them are Christians. First one is Arno Penzias, who discovered the radiation afterglow. He said, the best data we have concerning the Big Bang are exactly what I would have predicted had I had nothing to go on but the 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, and the Bible as a whole. His colleague, Robert Wilson, said, certainly there was something that set it all off. I can't think of a better theory of the origin of the universe to match Genesis. George Smoot, who taught at UCal Berkeley, put it this way. He said, there is no doubt that a parallel exists between the Big Bang as an event and the Christian notion of creation from nothing. Now, if the universe had a beginning, it seems it must have had a beginner. Now, this is the scientific evidence the universe had a beginning. Let me give you a line of philosophical evidence that the universe had a beginning. Let's take a look at a timeline. Here's a timeline. Here's the present right here. And there's yesterday, there's the day before yesterday, and there's last week. And let's say we don't know how far into the past this timeline goes. First question I have for you, could this timeline be infinite into the past? The answer is no. Why? First of all, what is the definition of an infinite? Something that has no end. But here's the end of the timeline, right? You can't have a timeline, an infinite timeline that has an end to it. Also, you can't add to an infinite, because tomorrow we're going to add another day to this timeline, and the day after that we'll add another day, and the day after that we'll add another day. You get the idea, we're adding here. Also, and this will really make you think hard, today never would have gotten here if there were an infinite number of days before today. Think about that for a minute. Why? Because you could always live another day before today got here. If there is an infinite number of days before today, you'd always have to live another day before today got here. Remember, you just can't traverse an infinite. There's always another day to live. Now, that certainly can give you intellectual constipation, if you think about that long enough. But this argument, I think, is philosophically inescapable, that, in effect, time had a beginning. If the past were infinite, today never would have arrived. And isn't it interesting, on at least 4 occasions, Paul talks about time having a beginning. Time had a beginning. If time had a beginning, whatever caused the universe must be timeless. Now, if the universe had a beginning, it must have had a beginner. The evidence leaves us with one of the following 2 options. Either no one created something out of nothing, that's the atheistic view, or someone created something out of nothing, that is the theistic view. Now, my only question is this: which view is more reasonable? That no one created something out of nothing, or that someone created something out of nothing? I think number 2, right? I was at Texas A&M, and one atheist said, oh, no, I think number 1 is more reasonable. I said, number 1? Let's take a look at number 2 for a second. Number 2 says someone created something out of nothing. Now, that is a miracle, but at least you have a miracle worker. You've got someone. Number 1 is a miracle with no miracle worker. That's clearly absurd. I said to the audience that night at A&M, I said, to show you how seriously we all take the law of causality, and oh, by the way, the law of causality does not say everything needs a cause. The law of causality says everything that comes to be needs a cause. There has to be an uncaused first cause. Aristotle would call it the unmoved mover. There has to be something that's self-existent, that got everything in motion and sustains it in motion. That's exactly what we mean by God. But if the universe had a beginning, then it must have had a beginner. So I said to the audience that night, I said, to show you how seriously we all take the law of causality, that things don't pop into existence out of nothing and by nothing, there is nobody sitting here in this auditorium tonight who is currently worried that as you sit here, a hippopotamus has appeared out of nothing without a cause and is currently defecating on your pillow. You don't worry about that. In fact, you don't worry about a raging Bengal tiger appearing right here in this aisle and taking people out, right? Things don't pop into existence out of nothing without a cause. And if they did, why doesn't everything pop into existence out of nothing without a cause? Why don't Mercedes-Benzes and MacBook Pros pop into existence? Could have saved me a couple of grand. By the way, if you're hungry for a pizza, does it make sense to order one or just sit around, wait, and hope? Talk about faith. It's the atheists that have to have all the faith, all the unreasonable faith. So the only question is, which view is more reasonable? Now, you say, well, how do atheists respond to this? Poorly. You know what atheists try and do? They try and just say we're one of many universes out there, and we just happen to look like we were created and designed. And so they come up with what's called the multiverse theory. And in fact, this was graphically illustrated quite beautifully by National Geographic a number of years ago. Here is their rendition of the multi-universe theory. Self-generating universes, multiple universes grow like branches from a tree trunk in a model that allows the universe to create itself. Hello, McFly. Can you create yourself? No, you can't create yourself. You have to exist prior to creating anything. I don't know about you, but I'm not going to let some graphic artist down at National Geographic draw some sort of demented French horn to get me to believe that's how we got here. One scientist very early on in the article said, it's sort of like we're brushing our ignorance under the rug of the very early universe. He's absolutely right. Look, if space, matter, and time had a beginning, the cause can't be made of space, matter, and time. The cause must be spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. Also powerful to create the universe out of nothing. Also intelligent, as we'll see here in a minute, because he did it with extreme precision. Also personal, to decide to create. So when you think about a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, intelligent, personal cause, who do you think of? God. That's what we mean by God. As Aquinas would say, that's what all men know to be God. This was not lost on Robert Jastrow. Again, the agnostic astronomer who wrote the book God and the Astronomers. Again, agnostic, doesn't know whether God exists or not, but he goes through all the evidence for the beginning of the universe. And this is how he ends the book. This is the last line in the book. He says, for the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he's greeted by a band of theologians who've been sitting there for centuries. No doubt reading Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now, can anyone give me any good reason why we ought not be teaching this surge evidence in our government school system, in our public schools? Did I say anything about the reason we believe this is true is because the Bible says so? No, I'm simply saying it's congruent with the Bible. It agrees with the Bible. But you don't need the Bible to know it. This is just evidence. That's all it is. Let the kids decide what they do with the Creator, if there is a Creator. In fact, our founding document says what? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men were created and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Well, we can't teach that in the government school system anymore? Is the Declaration of Independence unconstitutional? In fact, what do you think Thomas Jefferson would do, who wrote the Declaration of Independence? What do you think he would do if he were to come back today? Remember, he's the man who said taxation without representation is tyranny. What do you think he would do today if he were to come back and see that his tax dollars were going to pay public school teachers to teach his kids that his Declaration of Independence was in effect unconstitutional? I think he'd start the Second American Revolution. What are you talking about? That's how far we've fallen. By the way, do you want to know whose fault that is? It's the church's fault. We haven't been the church for the past 100 years. We're too worried to say anything about anything. We're too worried to stand up and defend anything. Somebody may call us a name. We can't have that. You'll see why this afternoon. Greg is going to show you some great ways to deal with name calling. You simply say, I know what you are, but what am I? No, he's got more sophisticated tactics than that. You'll see, all right? All right, so the point here is that there was a beginning to the universe. And we'll see later a sustaining cause exists right now. Let's now take a look at the teleological argument. This is the design of the universe and also the design of life. We'll start with the design of the universe, and this is sometimes called the fine-tuning of the universe. The question is, what explains fine-tuning? Is it design or something else? And what do we mean by the fine-tuning of the universe? The universe, aspects of the universe, certain constants in the laws of nature and the laws of nature themselves are so supremely fine-tuned that if you were to change any one of these factors just slightly, certainly there'd be no life here on Earth, and there might not even be galaxies. There might be nothing more than helium or hydrogen in the universe. There might not be anything, because the universe may have collapsed back on itself. In fact, this is exactly what Stephen Hawking says. Again, an atheist puts it this way. He says, if the expansion rate of the universe was different by 1 part in 1,000 million a second after the Big Bang, the universe would have collapsed back on itself or never developed galaxies. In other words, if you were to change the expansion rate that infinitesimal amount at the very beginning of the universe, we wouldn't be here. The same thing is true with our current expansion rate, sometimes called the cosmological constant. That is fine-tuned, apparently, to 1 in 10 to the 20 precision, which is an incomprehensible number. The gravitational force is fine-tuned to 1 in 10 to the 40. If it were altered by more than that, we wouldn't be here. What's 1 in 10 to the 40? Well, you know how numbers work with these exponents on them, this scientific notation, 10 to the 40? That means 1 part in 1 with 40 zeros following it. In fact, let me just give you an illustration of this. The common dating of the universe, the scientific dating says the universe is 13.8 billion years old. We can talk about the age of the Earth later during the Q&A if you want. But let's just take that dating. What is 13.8 billion years old? It's 10 to the 18 seconds. Okay, what's the difference between 10 to the 18 seconds and 10 to the 19 seconds? How much bigger is 10 to the 19 than 10 to the 18? Yeah, 10 means it's 10 times bigger. You're adding a 0. This is 10 to the 40. You go, Frank, I can't get my head around that number. I know, let me give you an illustration. Take a tape measure and stretch it across the entire known universe. That's a long way, by the way. Set the gravitational force at a particular inch mark on that tape measure. I know gravity's not measured in inches. This is just to give you a scale idea in your mind. If you were to move the strength of gravity 1 inch in either direction, we wouldn't be here. That's 1 in 10 to the 40 precision. There's only 3 possible explanations for that value being right where it is. One is physical necessity. It had to be there. No, it didn't have to be there. It could have been here, could have been here, could have been a million miles that way. The second is chance. I don't have enough faith to believe it just happened to arrive there by chance, whatever that is. You notice that chance is not a cause, by the way. Chance is a word we use to describe mathematical possibilities. There's not a force out there known as chance. So when scientists begin to use the word chance, what they really mean is, we don't know. The third possibility after physical necessity and chance is design. Somebody designed it to be right there. It seems to me that's the best explanation. In fact, again, this man, Arno Penzias, is not a Christian. Actually, I think he renewed his Jewish faith after discovering the radiation afterglow, the R in surge, the remnant heat from the initial Big Bang explosion. He put it this way. He said, astronomy leads us to a unique event, a universe which was created out of nothing, one with the very delicate balance needed to provide exactly the right conditions required to permit life, and one which has an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan. It's not just these constants about the universe that appear to be fine-tuned. Our solar system appears to be designed with us in mind. For example, where are we in the solar system? Right there, third rock from the sun. If we were just a little bit closer to or a little bit further away, we wouldn't be here. A little bit closer to, we'd burn up. A little bit further away, we'd freeze. We are what scientists call the Goldilocks zone. It is not too hot. It is not too cold. It is the axial tilt, 23.5 degrees. Change that slightly, we don't exist. Earth rotation, 24 hours. Change that slightly, we don't exist. The size and distance of the moon from us, change that slightly, we don't exist. Oxygen is 21% in the atmosphere. If it were 15%, we'd all suffocate. If it were 25%, spontaneous fires would break out. If Jupiter was not in its current orbit, we wouldn't be here. Why? What does Jupiter do for us? Go ahead. What does it do? You are absolutely right. Give that young man a hand. Man, he's getting excited about Jupiter, isn't he? All right. You're absolutely right. That's what Jupiter does. Jupiter's gravitational force is so strong that it attracts many of the meteors and space junk to it rather than us. In fact, if you take a close-up look at Jupiter, you see what those purple marks are? Those purple marks are comet fragment strikes that are bigger than the Earth. Thank God for Jupiter. Because if Jupiter wasn't there, we wouldn't be here. In fact, I saw a headline on the Drudge Report about a year ago, and every time I read the Drudge Report, I think the world is ending. Anyway, it said this: scientists believe major meteor to hit Earth in 2040. I am rooting for Jupiter. You want to get the size of Jupiter? Check this out. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Earth. Look at poor Pluto down here. You know, Pluto recently has been demoted as a planet. I don't know about you, but I think it's size discrimination. Take a look at this. You can hardly see Pluto. Take a look at this. That's Arcturus. That's another star in our galaxy. Here's the sun. Jupiter is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Earth is invisible. Pluto, forget about it. Now take a look at, you got Arcturus here? Okay, keep an eye on Arcturus. Where's Arcturus now? There's Arcturus to the left of the white star Rigel. That's Antares. That's another star in our galaxy. That's not outside our galaxy. That's in our galaxy. The sun is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Jupiter is invisible. Earth, Pluto, forget about them. The heavens are awesome. In fact, if the Earth was the size of a golf ball, Beetlejuice here would be 5 or 6 Empire State Buildings high. Think about that. That's just in our galaxy. All the distance, or the average distance between stars in our galaxy is 30 trillion miles. All that distance is necessary for us to exist here on Earth. If it were much different, gravitational forces would cause us not to be able to stay in orbit, and therefore we couldn't live. Now, 30 trillion miles, how far is that? Far. Take you at least 2 tanks of gas in a Toyota Prius to go 30 trillion miles. That is if the gas pedal doesn't stick. Now, I was out at the Desert Museum in Tucson, Arizona a number of years ago. You guys ever been out in the Desert Museum? It's outside of Tucson a little ways. And so if you're out there at night, there's no city lights. And if it's a clear night, you can see thousands of stars in the sky. And one night we're out there, and the guide said, hey, it's so clear tonight, if we look up at 9:03, we're going to see the space shuttle in orbit. I said, oh, come on, we're not going to see the space shuttle in orbit. It's only 120 feet long. It's 350 miles up. We're not going to see it. Oh, me of little faith. At 9:03, the guy goes, look! And we look up in the sky, about 70 degrees above the horizon. There's an object streaking out of the west, relative to us, about like this. I mean, it's really cooking. When it got right about here, it disappeared. I don't know whether Scotty beamed it up or what. But it was just cruising across the sky, and then suddenly it was gone. Well, actually what happened was, despite the fact that we were in total darkness, the space shuttle was so high up, the sun was still reflecting off it so we could see it. As soon as it got out of the range of the sun, we couldn't see it anymore. Now, when the space shuttle is in orbit, the space shuttle is traveling at about 18,000 miles an hour. That's 5 miles per second. You got trouble getting to work in the morning? Take the space shuttle. You'll be there. Think about that. 5 miles a second. Now, I did a little calculation to try and figure out how long would it take us if we could get in the space shuttle and go from our star, the sun, to another star in our galaxy, an average distance away, 30 trillion miles. In other words, if we could go 5 miles a second, how long would it take us to go 30 trillion miles? How long do you think it would take us? A long time. That's a good answer, sir. It would take us 201,450 years. That means if you got in the space shuttle at the time of Christ and started traveling to another star an average distance away in our galaxy, you'd be less than 1/100th of the way there right now. And we're going to explore space. No, we're not. We're not going anywhere in space. Who'd like to go to the next nearest star? We'll go. Get in, kids. Are we almost there yet, Dad? Another 200,000 years. Play some more Xbox. No! Forget about it. It's not going to happen. In fact, you see this? This picture right here is from the ground. You see that little square right there? That's this square from the Hubble Space Telescope. Those are galaxies, heavenly bodies, stars. The heavens are awesome. How many stars are out there? Estimate about equivalent to the number of grains of sand on all the beaches on all the earth. And to go from one star to another star, going 5 miles a second, will take you over 200,000 years. February 1st, 2003, President Bush goes into the East Room in the White House. It's Saturday morning, 9 a.m. They turn the TV camera on. Every major network carries his address. Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Why? The president looks in the camera and says, "My fellow Americans, this morning our country experienced a great tragedy. Upon re-entry into the atmosphere, the space shuttle Columbia burned up in the skies over Texas. There are no survivors. The Columbia is lost." The president then went on to quote from Isaiah chapter 40, beginning in verse 25. Why Isaiah chapter 40? Because in Isaiah chapter 40, according to Isaiah, God is speaking. And what does God say? "To whom will you compare me, or who is my equal, says the Holy One." In other words, you want a comparison to know what I'm like? Lift your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these stars and named them one by one? Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. The president looked back in the camera and said, "The same God that created and named all these stars is the same God that created and knows the names of the 7 astronauts who perished today. While they did not return safely home to us, we can all now pray they've all returned safely home." You want to know who God is like? Most Christians have the wrong idea of who God is like. We think God is a big angel. No, God is not a big angel. You want to know who God is like? Meditate on the attributes of God. A spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent, sustaining, personal cause. Then remove all limits from your mind. That's God. Why is there a second commandment, "Thou shalt make no graven image"? At least one reason why is there a second commandment. Because any image you make of an infinite being necessarily limits his majesty. You can't draw a picture of infinity. Everything we know in our experience here on earth is limited. It's finite. God is unlimited, infinite. If he's an ounce of any attribute, he's infinite in that attribute. If he's an ounce of love, infinite love. Ounce of justice, infinite justice. Ounce of power, infinite power. He is the standard by which everything else is measured. Psalm 103, verse 11 says, "God's love to those that fear him exceeds the height of the heavens above the earth." How high are the heavens above the earth? Stars equivalent to grains of sand on all the beaches on all the earth. 200,000 years at 5 miles a second between those stars. From our perspective, infinite. Even though that's still finite, that's still limited. That's why the Bible says the heavens declare the glory of God. Look to the heavens. If you want to have an idea of an infinite being, look to the heavens, and even the heavens are finite. It's not just that when you look into the heavens can you see evidence for God. When you look through a microscope at a simple, so-called simple form of life, you can see evidence for design as well. Do you see this? This is a one-celled amoeba. The Darwinists say we all evolved from something like this. You heard of the theory of macroevolution? From the goo to you via the zoo? This is the goo. Or from the infantile to the reptile to the crocodile to the gentile? This is the infantile. Well, in Darwin's day, this was not considered to be any big deal, that maybe non-living chemicals could come together and somehow, through natural forces, create a living thing, and then natural selection could take over, and that could explain how all these living things got here, all these new life forms. If Darwin knew what he knew today, or what we know today about a cell, I doubt he would have his theory that he has now. Because that he had 150 years ago, when we look at a cell now, we see, first of all, it's a factory. But secondly, there's something that has the unmistakable signs of intelligence in it. And in order to show you these unmistakable signs of intelligence, I have to take you to your breakfast table. How many people in here like alphabet cereal? Anyone? All right, let's suppose you want to have a bowl of alphabet cereal. You come downstairs one morning to have a bowl, and you see the boxes knocked over on the table, and right in the middle of the table, the letters spell, "Take out the garbage, Mom." What are you going to assume? The cat knocked the box over? Earthquake shook the house? No, you're going to say that that's intelligent design from an intelligent being, Mom. Or let's suppose you're walking along the beach and you see in the sand, "John loves Mary." What do you assume? The crabs came out of the water and made that message? The waves did that? No, you're going to say that has to be the product of intelligence. Why? Because in all your prior experience, you know that messages only come from minds. The repetitive natural forces of nature, and there's only 4 known natural forces of nature. What are they? Does anyone know? Gravity's one of them. Electromagnetism, and the strong and weak nuclear forces. Those are the only 4 known forces of nature. And when we talk about the laws of nature, what we're saying is these 4 forces do certain things repetitively. We call them laws. But those 4 forces of nature can't explain a message like this. No more than the laws of ink and paper can explain why the letters in the Bible are in this order. You need intelligence to explain why the letters are in the order they are. You say, okay, fine, what does this have to do with life? Because if a message always requires a mind, where does this message come from? DNA. The 4-letter genetic alphabet that every living thing has. You have DNA, I have DNA, a banana has DNA. And inside of you, by the way, your genome is 3.5 billion letters long. All the letters are in the right order, save a rare error or two. And they have to be in that right order, or you wouldn't be here. And there's no known chemical, physical, biological force that can explain why the letters are in the order they're in up the spine of the DNA molecule. Oh, we know that A always goes with T and C always goes with G. But the order in which they go this way, there is no known physical, biological, or chemical reason or force that can tell us why they're in that order. This is literally a program. I don't know, from where I come from, whenever there's a program, there must be a programmer. Now, you say, well, Frank, maybe it started really simply in an amoeba. Well, first of all, even if there was a simple code in amoeba and it evolved, codes don't evolve. I mean, what do you think would happen if you took the Microsoft PowerPoint code that I'm showing you this presentation on and just mutated it randomly? How long do you think this program would stay working? Not very long. But let's take a look at how much information is in an amoeba. A one-celled amoeba, supposedly a simple form of life. And by the way, how big is an amoeba? You could line up several hundred amoebas in an inch. And in each one of them, you've got the equivalent of 1,000 volumes of an encyclopedia in a microscopic amoeba. Now, to believe that that resulted by natural forces is like believing that the Library of Congress resulted from an explosion in a printing shop. I don't have enough faith to believe that. The first life seems to require an intelligent cause. You say, well, Frank, who told you this? Some Christian? No, you know who told me this? The most famous atheist in the world, Richard Dawkins. He admits there's that much information in a simple amoeba. Well, if there's that much information, that much of a message, it would seem there must be a messenger, which is, by the way, maybe why Dawkins How many have seen the movie Expelled? Have you seen the movie Expelled with Ben Stein? I just saw Ben Stein in Charlotte about a month ago. He came to Charlotte. He started off his talk this way. Those of you who don't know who I'm talking about when I say Ben Stein, you'll know it when I say it. He started off his talk, he comes up the podium, he goes, let's get this started right. Bueller. He was the teacher in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right? But he's an economist. You see him on TV a lot. Anyway, he was the narrator in this movie called Expelled, a documentary, which talks about how people who suggest that maybe intelligence is behind life and behind the universe are being expelled from the academy. They're being fired. They're being denied tenure. They're getting all sorts of trouble. And at the end of the movie, he interviews Richard Dawkins. And he says, Dr. Dawkins, how did life begin? And Dawkins says, well, I have no idea. And Stein persisted and said, what do you think your best suggestion is? And he said, I suppose you could say that life was brought here by aliens. At that point, Ben Stein stopped and he said, I don't believe it. Dr. Dawkins believes in intelligent design. Why? Because an alien's an intelligent designer. You notice that? He's an intelligent designer. Now, why would Dawkins be open to an alien bringing life here, but not God? I think I know why. He hasn't said this, but I think I know why. Because God brings morality with him, an alien doesn't. Of course, this just puts the question off one more step. Who created the alien? If natural forces can't create life here on Earth, why should we expect natural forces to create life somewhere else and then bring it here? Why is this not like who made God? Because God is not inside the universe. God is outside the universe, and he's timeless. If you're timeless, do you have a beginning? No, he is the uncaused first cause. He's the unmoved mover. But an alien is created in the universe. So who created the alien? He's not helping himself here. He's simply admitting that the evidence seems to be so tilted toward intelligence that he has to come up with an alien as a possibility. Last thing before we take a break. Do you see this? We were all at one point there. That's 11 weeks in the womb. Question, is that animal, mineral, vegetable, or human? That's human. In fact, let's go all the way back to when your mother and your father got together. Have you guys had this talk before? I see some young people in here, so I'll try and be discreet. When your mother and your father got together to make you, your father sent the entire population of the United States, 300 million soldiers, toward your mother's egg. And then there was a race, and you won. Don't let anyone ever tell you you're not special. You beat out 300 million others. You have blown away anything Michael Phelps has done. Now, seeing some of you limp in here earlier makes it hard for me to believe you were the fastest soldier in the gene pool. But you were. And your soldier was 20 to 30 times smaller than a grain of salt, yet it contained half of the genetic information that makes you you. And your mother's egg was about the size of a period at the end of a sentence in an average book, and it contained the other half of the genetic information that makes you you. And when your soldier and your egg came together, a new 100% genetic human being was created. Do you know you have not received any more genetic information from that point till right now? In fact, there were only 4 things separating you from adulthood: time, air, water, and food. Those are the same 4 things that separate a 2-year-old from adulthood. Does this have implications on the abortion issue? Yeah, I think it does. We don't kill the 2-year-old. Why do we kill the unborn child in the womb? Genetically, it's the same. You say, Frank, you can't legislate morality. No extra charge for this. This isn't part of the presentation. But this was the subject of our first book. The only thing you can legislate is morality. All laws legislate morality. The only question is whose morality? And we ought not legislate my morality. We ought not legislate your morality. We ought to legislate the morality, the one Jefferson said was self-evident. Why did he put the right to life first in the Declaration of Independence? Because the right to life is the right to all other rights. If you don't have life, you don't have anything. Now, no extra charge for that. From that point till right now, an astonishing construction project began taking place. From the moment of your conception, cells began multiplying at a rate of 4,000 cells per second. So just after your contraception, 4,000 cells per second. Brain cells began multiplying at a rate of 100,000 cells per second, for most of you anyway. Some cells became heart cells, others became lung cells, others became brain cells. How do they know how to do this? Nobody knows. Some cells went so far across you to become what they needed to become that it would be equivalent to you today walking across the United States alone. And that construction project continues to this day. You just made 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. Knock it off. How do you know how to do this? Are you thinking about this? Are you going, I gotta make new blood cells. Wait, make more. No, why? Why can you do this? This is an argument that we don't use very often for God, but I'm going to take just 5 minutes here to talk about it. It's what Aristotle called final causality, and it was picked up by Thomas Aquinas, a medieval theologian in the 1200s. And basically, final causality points out that the entire created order is goal-directed. It's going in a direction. Whether it's about living things or non-living things, the entire reality is goal-directed. We see this in our biology. Why is an embryo goal-directed to become an adult? If it gets proper food and nutrition and isn't killed, it's going to become an adult. Why does an acorn always become an oak tree? Why doesn't it on occasion become a seahorse? Or a Tesla? Or a pepperoni pizza? Because it's goal-directed to become an oak tree. Why do the planets circle the sun? You say because of gravity, Frank. Yes, but why is gravity consistently doing what it's doing? Because it's goal-directed. Why can we take a rover, build it here on Earth, launch it, and put it on a planet, Mars, 60 million miles away with absolute precision? Because we can depend on the forces of nature being consistent and precise. Why? Because they're goal-directed. All of these things are goal-directed, and in order to be goal-directed, there has to be an external intellect directing them. You ever think about that? Somebody is holding this universe together right now, directing it toward an end. Whether they're living things or non-living things, there's a mind directing reality toward an end. In fact, there are biologists that manipulate fruit fly embryos to see what will happen to them. And whenever they try and manipulate a fruit fly embryo to try and get it to go in a different direction, the embryo makes heroic efforts to get back on track to become a fruit fly. And scientists routinely do this, and they always get one of three outcomes. They either get a normal fruit fly, a mutant fruit fly, or a dead fruit fly. They don't even get a horse fly, much less a horse. Why? Because the fruit fly embryo is directed to become a fruit fly. There's an external intellect directing. And yet we have this theory in so-called science now that says that these creatures and species can just blur the lines between one another over long periods of time, when we try with all of our intelligence to blur these lines, to go from one species to another or one type to another, and we can't with all our intelligence, yet we're led to believe that non-intelligent processes can do it. And you know what? Even if macroevolution were 100% true, there has to be an external intellect holding the natural forces of nature together that allows macroevolution to occur. So even if macroevolution is true, you don't get rid of the need for an external intellect, i.e. God. Outside of that, I don't feel strongly on this issue at all. But let's go to the moral argument. In April of 1945, the Allies liberated the Buchenwald concentration camp in Wiedmar, Germany. I had the opportunity to visit there a few years back. And they went through the front gate, which is still there, and then they looked off to the right and saw the crematorium about 100 yards off in the distance, and it's still there. When they got to the crematorium, they looked into the courtyard attached to the crematorium, and this is what they saw. Brace yourself. Now, if there is no God, this is just a matter of opinion. It's just your opinion against somebody else's opinion, Hitler's opinion. But we all intuitively understand that this is objectively morally wrong. It's not just a matter of opinion. If it's objectively morally wrong, there must be a source, an authoritative moral standard out there that establishes this as being morally wrong, and that's what we mean by God's nature. Look, if the question here is, how do you know who's right and who's wrong? Is it Mother Teresa or Hitler? How could you discover? Well, let me ask the question this way. How do you know which map of Scotland is better? Is it map A or map B? Well, in order to discover which map is better, what would you need to see? Yeah, you would need to see a real unchanging place called Scotland, right? If Scotland doesn't exist, then these two maps are meaningless. But since Scotland does exist, we can see map A, while it's not perfect, is a better representation of the real map or the real Scotland than is map B. In other words, you have a standard to which you can measure the two options. That's exactly what we do when we compare Mother Teresa and Hitler. Mother Teresa wasn't the standard. Hitler wasn't the standard. There's a standard beyond both of them by which we measure both of them. And we say Mother Teresa measured up to the standard better than did Hitler. If the standard didn't exist, there's no way to say which one was better or worse. If there's no best, then there's no way to figure out who's better and who's worst. In fact, if there is no God, then what the Nazis did was not really wrong. I was at Michigan State doing a presentation like this once, and sitting over on this side of the audience during the Q&A, there were a couple of atheists, and we got talking about morality. And so I asked one of the atheists, I said, well, you're an atheist, but how do you come up with morality? What's morality in your worldview? He said, whatever the majority decides is morally right. I said, are you telling me that if you lived in Nazi Germany that murdering Jews would be morally right? And he paused, he blushed, and he said, yes. And his atheistic buddy sitting right next to him looked at him and yelled, no! The first kid knew in his heart the answer was no, but in order to be consistent with his atheism, he had to say yes. Actually, on atheism, there is no morality. Everything's a matter of opinion. Who says the majority gets to decide? It's whoever has the most power imposes his relativistic will on anybody else. There's no standard. We're molecules in motion. How do you get morality from that? If there is no God, then love is no better than rape. Not in an objective way, anyway. If there is no God, there are no human rights. Martin Luther King didn't do anything good. Why? Because there's no such thing as best out there. There's nothing wrong with racism if there's no God. There's nothing wrong with anything if there's no God. Wilberforce, who freed the slaves. Lincoln, who freed the slaves. They didn't do anything right or wrong. It's just all a matter of opinion if there's no God. If there's no God, tolerance is no better than intolerance. By the way, if there's one absolute in our culture today, it's tolerance. But I've noticed the people who say they're fighting for tolerance are often the most intolerant people out there. Have you noticed that? By the way, are Christians commanded to be tolerant? No, we're commanded to be loving. You see, tolerance is too weak. Tolerance says, hold your nose and put up with them. Love says, reach out and help them. And in order to love somebody, quite frequently, you can't tolerate the evil they're doing. In fact, if you tolerate evil, you're unloving, not loving. We know this as parents. We don't tolerate everything our kids do. If we did, we wouldn't be loving. And the problem here is that you have to have some courage to exhibit true love, which means you have to stand for the truth, even if people won't like you for it. Also, if there's no God, religious crusades are not wrong. I always hear atheists talking about religious crusades. Christopher Hitchens brought them up in the debate I had with him, and I said, Christopher, you're right. Religious people have done evil things. But on your worldview, there's no such thing as good or evil. It's all a matter of opinion. So what's wrong with religious crusades if there's no God? And of course, you can't complain about the problem of evil if there is no God. It's commonly thought that evil somehow disproves God among the general public, but that's not the case at all. Most philosophers know that can't be the case. In fact, C.S. Lewis for many years thought that evil disproved God until one day he had an epiphany. He ultimately became a Christian, but when he was an atheist, he thought there was too much injustice in the world. And when after he had his epiphany, he put it in a book called Mere Christianity, and here's what he wrote. He said, as an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust, but how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? You have to have a standard by which to judge right from wrong. What is that standard? If there's no God, then nothing is ultimately good, which means nothing is ultimately evil. You see, evil doesn't disprove God. Evil may prove there's a devil out there, but it doesn't disprove God. Why? Because there'd be no such thing as evil unless there was good, and there'd be no such thing as good unless God existed. You could put it this way. The shadows prove the sunshine. In order to have shadows, you have to have sunshine. In other words, in order to have evil, you have to have good. Oh, you can have good without evil. You can have sunshine without shadows, but you can't have shadows without sunshine. You can't have evil without good. So evil doesn't disprove God. It's actually a backhanded argument for God. So, let me skip over this because I don't have time to cover it. Let me point out that from these three arguments that we've just been through, and again, there's a lot more in the book on the three arguments, but from these three arguments, we can draw some conclusions about the characteristics of God. From the cosmological argument, we can see that this being is immaterial, timeless, and spaceless. Why? Because he created material, time, and space, so he can't be made of material, time, and space. He must transcend it. Also, we can see that he's extremely powerful because he created out of nothing. Do you realize that everything we create out of pre-existing material? God creates out of nothing. Try creating out of nothing. Try creating out of what rocks dream about. Nothing. Also, from the design argument, we can see he's extremely intelligent. He put this universe together with extreme precision. And he also sustains creation and has purpose. We're here for a reason, and he's sustaining us right now. All these processes that are going on, this goal-directedness that is going on within us and outside of us is being directed by a sustaining intellect. Paul put it this way, in him we live and move and have our being. In Christ, or he said, Christ holds all things together. He created the universe and sustains the universe. From the moral argument, we can see he's absolutely morally perfect, and we can also see he's personal. How do we know he's personal from the moral argument? Because you only sin against persons. You don't sin against, say, the law of gravity, an impersonal force. Like when you go try and dunk a basketball, you're not sinning against the law of gravity. You only sin against persons. We also know that this being is personal from the cosmological argument. Why? To go from a state of nothingness to a state of creation, someone had to make a choice, and only persons make choices. Gravity, for example, doesn't make choices. Gravity doesn't go, look, if Turek drops that remote one more time, I'm not going to pull it to the ground. Right? Gravity just does the same thing over and over again, which means whatever created the universe must be a personal being. Now take a look at the attributes here. We have an immaterial, timeless, spaceless, extremely powerful, extremely intelligent, sustaining creator who has purpose, who is also absolutely morally perfect and personal. This is the God of biblical Christianity identified without reference to the Bible. We haven't even opened the Bible yet we have the attributes of the God of the Bible. Now, does this mean that the God of the Bible actually exists? Well, not necessarily. It means a theistic God exists who is like the God of the Bible, but it could be another theistic kind of God, right? Here are the major theisms out there. You've got Judaism, of course, Christianity, and Islam. Maybe just the Jewish concept of God is true, or the Islamic concept of God is true. If God really wanted to tell us which one of these theisms is true, what could he do? He could do something only he could do, and that would be a miracle. You see, that's point 3. We've got the fact that truth exists. We've got the fact that there's a theistic God out there. Now we have to see what kind of theistic God is out there. And for that, we have to look at this issue of miracles. And some people believe miracles are impossible. For example, they think, how could you believe in Noah? That seems so outlandish. What is the deal with Noah? I actually think the Noah miracle occurred. In fact, I went on a Noah's Ark expedition in 2006 into the mountains of Iran with a friend of mine, Bob Kornuk, who's the real Indiana Jones. I don't have time to tell you the story, but I will tell you that we got up to 13,000 feet where we had some intel. There could have been an old boat. We saw this object sticking out of the side of a mountain. We got up to it. It looked like it could have been the side of an old boat, but when we got up to it, it was rock. So we pulled samples off it. We brought them back to the United States, and 5 out of the 9 samples tested as petrified wood. But we can't prove it's Noah's Ark because it didn't say USS Noah on the side. Just can't do that. Resurrections don't happen. Everyone who knows about somebody dying, they say, well, that person's still dead. Why should I believe in a resurrection? And of course, the greatest miracle that people have trouble with in the Bible is Jonah. Is that a tale of a whale or a whale of a tale? What is the deal with Jonah? How can you believe in Jonah and the whale? Well, question. What is the greatest miracle in the Bible? It's not the resurrection. Yes, the greatest miracle in the Bible is the first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If that verse is true, every other verse is believable, right? I mean, if it's true that God created the heavens and the earth out of nothing, can he do whatever he wants that's not logically impossible inside the heavens and the earth? Can he do Jonah and Jesus and Noah and part the Red Sea? Can he do that if he can create the whole universe out of nothing? That's easy for God to create the whole universe out of nothing. Now, here's the interesting point. The point is we have scientific evidence and philosophical evidence. The first verse of the Bible is indeed true. The greatest miracle in the Bible has already occurred. So to say that future miracles after the first one haven't occurred is unreasonable. It's possible they have occurred. In fact, notice, let's assume for a second the New Testament documents are reliable. I haven't gotten there yet. But notice in the New Testament documents, Jesus relates 2 of the most controversial miracles in the Bible to his own life, Noah and Jonah. Do you think Jesus thought that those miracles were historical or hysterical? He thought they were historical. C.S. Lewis put it very well. He said, if we admit God, must we admit miracles? Indeed, you have no security against it. That is the bargain. If God exists, miracles are possible. In fact, miracles have to be rare to get our attention. A lot of people, as I said, don't believe in miracles because they haven't seen one or they haven't seen a resurrection. Let me ask you a question. If miracles like the resurrections occurred all the time, what would be the effect of Jesus' miracle on us? It would be zero, nada. You know, you go out there and say, Jesus rose from the dead, and they'd go, Uncle George rose from the dead 2 weeks ago. I got to give my inheritance back. I'm a little annoyed, all right? It doesn't, if that happened all the time, the value of the resurrection of Christ would be nothing. They have to be rare to get our attention, and that's what miracles are for in the Bible. They're sign miracles. They're signs to show us who speaks for God. Why should we follow Moses? Because God does miracles through Moses. Why should we follow Elijah and Elisha? Because God does miracles through Elijah and Elisha. Why should we follow Jesus and the apostles? Because God does miracles through Jesus and the apostles. They don't happen all the time. If they happened all the time, they would lose their ability to get our attention. So they have to be rare. So miracles are possible. The greatest miracle in the Bible has already occurred. The only question now is it true that subsequent miracles have occurred, particularly as the New Testament claims they have? Have these miracles really occurred to tell us that Jesus really was God incarnate? And for that, we have to look at the New Testament documents. Now, what we're going to do here is I'm going to give you 6 lines of evidence that the New Testament documents are telling the truth. They all begin with the letter E to help you remember them. Early testimony. We have early testimony. We also have eyewitness testimony. I'm just going to list them right now. We're going to drill down on a couple of these. We don't have time to do all of them. There's also embarrassing testimony. I'll explain what that is in a minute. We have excruciating testimony. I'll explain that one as well. We have expected testimony, and we also have extra-biblical testimony. And in the book, chapter 11 of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, there's a chapter called The Top 10 Reasons We Know the New Testament Writers Told the Truth. These are just 6 of them. There's 4 more in the book. We only have time to drill down on a couple, so I'm going to drill down on embarrassing and excruciating. But let me just say just a couple of quick words about these other ones. Early testimony. Most, if not all, the New Testament documents are written prior to 70 A.D. And much of the testimony obviously comes much earlier than that. In fact, the earliest testimony of the resurrection is actually in 1 Corinthians 15, verses 3 to 8. It's an ancient creed that was passed on orally that even atheists agree is pre-40 AD. In other words, it goes back to the resurrection event itself. There's eyewitness testimony. Just between the Gospel of John and the book of Acts, there's over 140 details that have been verified to be details that only an eyewitness would know. All these details, by the way, are listed in chapter 10 of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. I'll get to embarrassing and excruciating in a minute. Expected testimony, that deals with Old Testament prophecy. As you know, there's many Old Testament prophecies predicting a Messiah. If I only had one to make my case on, it would be Isaiah chapter 53. And if you've never read Isaiah chapter 53, go home and read it and ask yourself, who is this about? When you read it, you'll go, hey, this is about Jesus. The problem is it's written 700 years before Jesus, and we know it was written prior to Jesus because the greatest of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Isaiah Scroll, which I just saw last month in Jerusalem, the replica of it in the Shrine of the Book Museum, was 24 feet long. The entire book of Isaiah, and included in it was Isaiah 53, and that scroll dates from at least 150 BC. So we know this is prior to Christ. And then there's extra biblical testimony. There's 10 ancient non-Christian sources within 150 years of Jesus' life that these non-Christian sources mention briefly Jesus and the apostles and the events of the New Testament. Just very briefly, people like Josephus, Suetonius, Thallus, Phlegon, I'm sure you've read them on your devotionals at times. These kinds of people, you add up all of these brief references to Jesus and the apostles, and you get a story that's very similar to the New Testament. But let's drill down on embarrassing testimony. Now, what is embarrassing testimony? Embarrassing testimony is testimony that most scholars will say must be true. And the reason for this is, if you find something embarrassing to the author or authors in the text, chances are that's not going to be invented. I mean, you're not going to make up details that make yourself or your hero look bad, right? In fact, let me ask you guys the question this way. How many people in here have ever lied to make yourself look good? If you don't have your hand up right now, you're lying to make yourself look good, and we know you're lying. It's not working. How many people in here have ever lied to make yourself look bad? You don't lie to make yourself look bad. You might lie to make yourself look good, but you don't lie to make yourself look bad. Well, the New Testament documents, and this is true of the Old Testament documents, by the way, are filled with embarrassing details about the authors and even potentially about Jesus, we'll see. And that's why we call this, by the way, the duh factor. They wouldn't have made this up. Notice, they depict themselves as dim-witted. They fail to understand what Jesus is saying several times. They don't even know what his mission is until he's already ascended to heaven. Then they finally get it. But they depict themselves as dim-wits. They are uncaring. They fall asleep on Jesus not once, but twice. Stay up with me and pray. This is my greatest hour of need. He's in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's about to be executed. We'll do it, Lord. Don't worry. What do they wind up doing? Not once, but twice. And then they make no effort to give Jesus a proper burial. Who buries Jesus? Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus. Joseph of Arimathea is a member of the Sanhedrin. Why would they make him, who sentenced Jesus to die, his counsel? Why would they make him look like a good guy while they ran away and hid for fear of the Jews? And why would they put Jesus in a Jewish tomb? What could the Jews have done if the Christians began claiming Jesus had risen from the dead, yet Jesus' own dead body is in the Jews' own tomb? What could the Jews have done? They could have gone to their own tomb, taken out his dead body, and say, stop all this nonsense talk about the resurrection. He's dead. Here's his body right here. They didn't do that at all. What did they do? They said the disciples came and stole the body while the guards were asleep. Now, that's a bad explanation for at least 2 reasons. Reason number 1, if you're a Roman guard on duty and you fall asleep on watch, what happens to you? You're toast. Reason number 2, if you're a Roman guard on duty and you fall asleep on watch, how do you know what happened? What happened? Well, you see, we were asleep. And while we were sleeping, and remained sleeping, the disciples came and stole the body. Well, how would you know? Stop asking us questions and just give us the bribe. There's also a third reason why this makes no sense. What motive would the disciples have to steal the body and then say Jesus had risen from the dead? To get them excommunicated from the synagogue and then beaten, tortured, and killed? Why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense. You say, Frank, well, how do you even know this story is true? This alleged story, because it's in the Gospel of Matthew. Well, how do you know the Gospel of Matthew is telling us the truth? Because it's not just the Gospel of Matthew who tells us this. There's an ongoing debate in early Christianity, the early history of Christianity. Christians kept saying Jesus has risen from the dead. The Jews kept saying the disciples came and stole the body while the guards were asleep. Now, what does that explanation admit? That the body wasn't there, that the tomb was empty. You see, you don't have to come up with an empty tomb story if he's still in there, right? You would just take the body out and say, no, he's dead. The Jews admitted the tomb was empty by coming up with this alibi. So if you wanted to, by the way, you can add a seventh E. What would be the seventh E? Enemy testimony. Enemy testimony is very powerful. Why? Because if your enemy says something that helps your case, it's probably true, right? Like, for example, if your mom says you're brave, we go, okay, whoop-de-doo, it's mom. But if your arch enemy says you're brave, you're probably brave, right? Why would your enemy say that? Also, notice they are rebuked. Peter, their leader, is called Satan by Jesus. Do you think they made this up? Do you think Peter, or Mark, who recorded this, said to Peter, hey, Pete, I'm going to make this a real interesting story. I'm going to have the Lord call you Satan. What do you think Peter would have said? Have him call you Satan. Why is he calling me Satan? I'm the leader here. And then Paul rebukes Peter for being wrong about a theological issue. He says, look, I told Peter to his face that he was wrong for trying to get these New Testament believers to obey the Old Testament law. Now, why would they say that if they're making all this up? Why would they have one apostle rebuking another apostle, who later on the church says is the first pope? Why would they have them rebuking, or Paul rebuking Peter, if they're making all this up? They wouldn't have this embarrassing kind of exchange going on. The reason it's in here is because it's true. By the way, I don't know, how many people in here have ever saw, this was back in February, there was a debate, there was a very popular debate between Ken Ham and Bill Nye. How many saw that debate? How many thought that was a good debate? Yeah, very few of us, me included. Well, on February 8th, I did a radio show on this, and it's on our app. If you get our free app, you can listen to the show. And I said, here's some great things Ken Ham did, and here's some things I wish he had done differently. And, of course, it's easy being a Monday morning quarterback. I know debates are hard, and he did some very good things. But it wasn't just what he said. It was what he didn't say that was the problem. And so I was being, I thought, very gracious. But I get an email from a listener who says, you ought not be criticizing other Christians. What was she doing to me? She's criticizing me, right? Should we not criticize other Christians? Paul criticizes Peter in the Bible. In fact, Paul points out a lot of people who aren't doing things properly. Jesus does too. Don't buy into this nonsense, we can't criticize other Christians. No, you don't have to be unkind doing it. In fact, one of the main reasons we have this scripture is to correct one another. 2 Timothy 3 gives us the reason we have the scriptures. It's to make you wise unto salvation, and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and helping everybody do good works. So we have to correct one another. In fact, the word disciple comes from discipline. In order to become more like Christ, we have to correct one another. And one thing about that debate, I want to ask you guys this question. And this is the question I asked the radio audience. As you know, the Ken Ham, Bill Nye debate really centered around the age of the earth. That was the whole thing, which I think was silly. Here's why. Question. Is it possible that Christianity is true and the universe is 13.8 billion years old? Yes. Question 2. Is it possible that Christianity is true, but God does not exist? No. So why are you spending all your time debating how old the universe is when you can spend time giving evidence that God exists? You see my point? Spend time on the major issues. Don't minor in issues that are not major issues, particularly when you have an opportunity before a national audience to debate somebody and give them the best shot that we have. Outside of that, I don't feel strongly on it. Okay. They are also cowards. Peter denies Christ 3 times after saying, Lord, I'll never deny you. And then the disciples run away. This is like a Monty Python movie. Run away. Oh, they all run away. And who are the brave ones? The women. The women are the brave ones. Now, who wrote this down? Men. Now, what man is going to say that he was hiding for fear of the Jews while the women went down and discovered the empty tomb? Would any man in here say that? No way. I mean, if I was making this up, I'd write something down like, let's see, we marched right down there and overpowered that elite Roman guard. Yeah, that sounds good. And then we saw Jesus, who congratulated us on our great faith. And then we went and comforted the trembling women. I would never say I was Mr. Sissy Pants while the women went down and discovered the empty tomb. And oh, by the way, why would you never say in that culture that the women were the first witnesses? Yeah, because in that culture, a woman's testimony was not considered on par with that of a man. So if you're making up the New Testament story, you'd only have the men be the first witnesses. But all 4 Gospels say the women were the first witnesses, which is telling us what? They really were. They wouldn't have said it that way. Actually, a lady came up to me once after I was doing a seminar like this, and she said, I know why Jesus appeared to the women first. I said, why? And she said, because he wanted to get the story out. I said, that is an excellent point. I had not thought of that before. I mean, ladies, when your man comes home from work, does he say much? There could have been a nuclear explosion down at the plant. He's not going to tell you, right? You imagine Peter coming home that first Resurrection Sunday, his wife sees him and says, hey, honey, anything happening at work today? Nah. Same old, same old. Wait, I heard Jesus had risen from the dead just like he had predicted. Is it true? Oh, yeah, it is. What do you got to eat around here? You see, men don't say much. Also, notice they are doubters. Despite being taught several times that Jesus would rise from the dead, the disciples are doubtful when they hear of his resurrection. Not only are they doubtful when they hear of his resurrection, check this out. Some are even doubtful after they see him risen. After they see him risen. This is Matthew 28:17. What happens in Matthew 28:19? Anyone? Yeah, the Great Commission. The Great Commission. This is a climactic point in the gospel. This is the end of Matthew. Jesus is there with his disciples. And he says, go, therefore, make disciples of all nations. Notice he doesn't say make believers. Make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. And lo, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. And as he's giving that climactic Great Commission, some are standing there going, you see that guy over there? Yeah. That guy over there is Jesus. Oh, no, it can't be Jesus. He was just killed not long ago. I saw it. No, it's Jesus. It can't be Jesus. He was killed. He was crucified. The spear went in his side. Blood and water came out. He was dead. I'm telling you, the Romans killed him. No, it's Jesus. It can't be Jesus. It is. How do you know it's Jesus? The women told me. See, they're not making this up. There's even potentially embarrassing testimony in here about Jesus himself. Notice in John chapter 3, he's considered out of his mind by his own family who come to seize him and take him home. His own family thinks he's nuts. Now you've heard people say, well, you know, the New Testament writers embellish Jesus to be God. Oh, really? Then why are they putting this kind of thing in there? Also, he's deserted by many of his followers. In John chapter 6, he says, look, if you want to follow me, you must eat my flesh and drink my blood. And many of the disciples said, this is a hard teaching. We can't follow this guy anymore. Hey, if I was there, I'd say the same thing. Eat flesh, drink blood. What are you, a cannibal? I'm not following you either. And who would have made up eat flesh, drink blood? That's not a made-up doctrine. Maybe embarrassing in that context, but it's certainly not made up. He's not believed in by his own brothers. In John chapter 7, his own brothers don't believe in him. Now, that's very embarrassing to have your own family, your own brothers not believe in you. We learn later, however, that James, the half-brother of Jesus, dies as a martyr in 62 A.D. He's the pastor of the church in Jerusalem. The Sanhedrin throw him off the Temple Mount, and when he hits the ground, they bludgeon him to death. They stone him. Why is he dying as a martyr for his brother when Jesus was on the earth before the resurrection, he did not think his own brother was God? You know who tells us what actually happened? Actually, that martyrdom isn't recorded in the New Testament documents. Two historians tell us this. Josephus, who was in Jerusalem at the time, the Jewish historian who lived from 37 A.D. to 100 A.D., and Hegesippus, who lived later, he's another historian, he tells us a similar account. Yet we know that it seems James became a believer because Jesus appeared to him. In the Creed, 1 Corinthians 15, verses 3 to 8, it says Jesus appeared to James. And that convinced him that his own brother was God. But when Jesus was on the earth prior to the resurrection, James didn't think his own brother was God. Now, how many people in here have a brother? All right, how many people in here have a brother who thinks he's God? Yeah, you don't believe in him either, do you? Of course not. James didn't either. He's thought to be a deceiver. He turns off Jewish believers to the point that they want to stone him. In John chapter 8, he's talking to Jews who believed in him. And he gets in the conversation to the point where he says, look, if you believe in Abraham, you ought to believe in me. And they said, we're not believing you. Not believing in you. And he said, look, I knew Abraham. So if you follow in Abraham, you ought to believe in me. And they said, you're not even 50 years old. How could you know Abraham? And he said, before Abraham was born, I am. And they immediately picked up stones to stone him. Why? They knew what he was claiming to be. What was he claiming to be? He's claiming to be Yahweh from the Old Testament. What's the I am quotation from? Yeah, Exodus 3:16 or Exodus 3:14, the burning bush. Do you remember when God appeared to Charlton Heston? Moses says to God, who should I tell the Israelites you are? And God says, tell them I am sends you. What does I am mean? I am means the self-existent eternal one. The being that had no beginning will have no end. The being that created and sustains all of creation. The being whose essence is his existence. The being who is being. Everybody else has being, he is being. That's who Jesus claimed to be. He claimed to be Yahweh. That's why the Jews picked up stones to stone him. They knew exactly what he was saying. Now, it amazes me today there are people out there who say Jesus never claimed to be God. Like Jehovah's Witnesses. When they come to my door, I go, come on in. Have a seat. Want something to drink? They get the Watchtower material out. I go, whoa, before we get to the Watchtower, can I just ask you a couple of questions? Yeah, sure. First question I ask all unbelievers. If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? Difficult for Jehovah's Witnesses because they'll get disfellowshipped. Just like Muslims who may be killed, Mormons may get disfellowshipped. So there's a lot riding on them personally to give up their current beliefs. But second question is just for Jehovah's Witnesses, and it's this. If Jesus never claimed to be God, then why did they kill him? For saying love your neighbor? Does that get you killed? Imagine Jesus is out giving a sermon, so he says, so love your neighbor. And there's people in the audience going, what did you say? Did he say love you? We can't tolerate that. You must die. No, you don't get killed for saying love your neighbor, but you get killed for claiming to be God. Why? Because in that context, the Jewish context, that's blasphemy. And in the Roman world, that's sedition. Early on in Christianity, the Romans knew the Jews, or the Christians were not Jews, so they called them atheists. Why did they call them atheists? Because they wouldn't worship the Roman Godhead or give any sort of honor to Caesar. So they figured these people must be atheists. That's the reason Jesus was killed. He was killed because he claimed to be God. He wasn't killed for skipping around saying, love your neighbor and bless those who persecute you. He was killed precisely because he claimed to be God. Also, Jesus is called a madman. He's called a drunkard. He's called demon-possessed. Hey, that's real flattering. Think they just put that in there for laughs? Also, he has his feet wiped with the hair of a prostitute, which easily could have been seen as a sexual advance. You notice, by the way, there are 2 prostitutes in Jesus' bloodline, the Messiah's bloodline. Do you think Matthew and Luke got together and said, you know what? We need to spice up the Messiah's bloodline a little bit. Let's put a couple of prostitutes in there. Let's see, Rahab, Tamar. Why don't we also put in there like a David? He's an adulterer and a murderer. And let's put Bathsheba in there. She's an adult. In fact, one of the writers won't even mention Bathsheba's name. What does he say? Uriah's wife. Now you get all these embarrassing details in the Messiah, the Messiah's bloodline. You don't find anything similar to this in other ancient histories, like, for example, in Egypt. You don't find any embarrassing details about the pharaohs. Why? Because the Pharaoh would chop the heads off of his historians if they started saying embarrassing details about him. But the New Testament and the Old Testament is filled with embarrassing details about the supposed heroes of the faith. Why? Because they're just telling the truth. The only one that isn't stained by sin is Jesus, yet all these embarrassing things, or potentially embarrassing things, are related to Jesus. Why? Because they're telling the truth. They're not making this up. Also, he's crucified despite the fact that anyone who's hung on a tree is under God's curse. If you're making up a Messiah to the Jews, you don't hang him on a tree. You may have him come in on a white horse. You may have him come in and slay the Romans, but you don't hang him on a tree. Because according to Deuteronomy 21:23, that man is under God's curse. Well, he was under God's curse. What curse? The curse of sin that we put him under. Now, there's more in the book on embarrassing testimony. Let's do one more here. Let's talk about excruciating testimony. And we get the word excruciating. It means out of the crucifixion. And this is the argument that says that these people who were in a position to know whether Jesus had risen from the dead or not died excruciating deaths. They lived brutal lives when they could have easily spared themselves from all that by saying, look, he didn't rise from the dead. I'm still a Jew. Before we look at, by the way, this is a painting, a Caravaggio of Peter being crucified upside down. Before we look at that, though, let's take a look at the apostles' beliefs and practices before and after the resurrection. Remember, all the early Christians were Jews initially. There's only one of the 8 or 9 writers, depending upon who wrote Hebrews, who's not a Jew. Who is it? Luke. Luke is the only one. Everyone else is a Jew. They thought they were God's chosen people and had a relationship with God for like 2,000 years. And before Jesus came, they believed in animal sacrifice. They had been slaying lambs and other animals to God for hundreds of years. And then suddenly Christ comes along and they say, you know, we don't need to do these animal sacrifices anymore. Christ is here. We don't need to slay all these lambs anymore because they're all symbols. Here's the real Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. We don't need to do all this anymore. Just overnight, done. Before they believed in a binding law of Moses. Afterwards they said Christ's life has fulfilled the binding law of Moses. Before they believed in strict monotheism. Afterwards they believed in a Trinity. 3 persons in one divine essence. Yes, I know the Trinity is hinted at in the Old Testament, but it's much clearer in the New. Before they believed in the Sabbath. In fact, they thought they could be stoned for not obeying the Sabbath. Afterwards, they worshiped on Sunday, and Paul even says in Colossians chapter 2, don't let anyone ever tell you have to obey any festival or Sabbath day. If you look in the New Testament, 9 out of the 10 commandments from the Old Testament are repeated in the New Testament. There's only one that isn't. What is it? Keep holy the Sabbath. Theocracy's over. Before they believed in a conquering Messiah. Afterwards they believed in a sacrificial Messiah. Before they believed in circumcision. Afterwards they believed in baptism and communion. Now, what would have caused these pious Jews, who thought they were God's chosen people and had a unique relationship with the God of the universe, to abandon everything on the left for everything on the right virtually overnight? There's only one thing I can think of that would cause something like this, and it's what psychologists call an impact event. What's an impact event? An impact event is an event that occurs to you that impacts you so greatly, emotionally and intellectually, that it can transform your belief system overnight. Some impact events are so impactful that you'll remember what happened that day Even though it happened 50 years ago. You might not remember what you had for breakfast this morning, but you'll remember the events of that impact event forever, till the day you die. Now, only some of you are going to be able to answer this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If you can remember where you were and what you were doing, November 22nd, 1963, raise your hand right now. Raise your hand. Hold it up high. Hold it up for a second. You see these people with their hands up, ladies and gentlemen? These people are very old. November 22nd, 1963 is my earliest memory. I was 2 years old in 2 days. Yes, I'm 52 years old. I know I don't look a day over 50. In fact, when I turned 50, my wife said, honey, you're going to live to be 100. I said, how do you know? And she said, because you look half dead already. Anyway, I'm standing at 2 years old in 2 days in the living room. My mother is on an ottoman in the living room watching a black and white TV, and she's weeping uncontrollably. Mommy, what happened? What happened? They killed the president. They killed the president. I can still see her in my mind right now as if she was sitting right there. I can see her when she was 26 years old. She's 77 today. But I can see her as if that's going on right now. That's my earliest memory. I don't remember anything before that and very little after that. Where were you when the second plane hit the tower? Now, 9/11 was, 12 and a half years ago? Coming up on 13? And everyone can remember where you were and what you were doing that day. Impact event. But if I ask you where you were on July 11th of this year, which is about 20 days ago, most of you are going to go, let me look at my iPhone. What was I doing that day? You wouldn't know. Why? No impact event. Do you think a resurrection would have been an impact event? Do you think if Jesus really rose from the dead, they would have remembered everything they were saying and everything they were doing till the day they died? Do you think they would have remembered everything Jesus was saying and everything Jesus was doing to the day they died? Of course. That's the only way I can figure out why they would have abandoned everything on the left for everything on the right virtually overnight. Now, some people will say, well, they invented all this. I want you to think about this for just a second. What motive did the New Testament writers have to gain by making up a new religion? Why would they do that? Why would they make up a new religion? Remember, these were Jews. What did they get by saying Jesus had risen from the dead? First of all, they got excommunicated from the synagogue, and then they got beaten, tortured, and killed. Last time I checked, that was not a list of perks. We're going to start a new religion. We are? Yeah, what's it going to get us? Well, first it'll get us excommunicated, and then if we're lucky, we'll get beaten, tortured, and killed. Well, sign me up. Why haven't we thought of this earlier? What a great idea. You see, they had every motive to say the resurrection did not happen, not every motive to say it did. I get this question a lot. Maybe you get this question a lot. Are there any non-Christian writers outside the New Testament that tell us about Jesus and the apostles? Well, actually, the answer is yes. I mentioned them earlier. They're in chapter 9 of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. But you know what that question assumes? Behind the question is a real, unreasonable, let me just say it, stupid assumption. You know what the assumption is? The assumption is that these people can't be trusted. Because you see, these were the religious people, and they were biased. But the non-Christian writers, the people that didn't have an axe to grind, they told us the truth. Well, if you think about that for 10 seconds, you realize how stupid that is. Why? Because these people had everything to lose by saying Jesus had resurrected. Everything to lose. They had nothing to gain. They got excommunicated, beaten, tortured, and killed, and yet they said it was true anyway, which is telling us what? It must have really happened. Why would they do this? And by the way, if you do look at the non-Christian writers, they tell us the same basic story. They don't say they believe Jesus rose from the dead, but the non-Christian writers tell us that Jesus' disciples believed he rose from the dead, which is what the New Testament's saying. In fact, why would they die for a known lie? You say, wait, Frank, you just got done talking about martyrdoms, and Islam has martyrs. You just got done talking about 9/11. I mean, Muslims don't believe Jesus rose from the dead. According to Surah 4, Jesus never even died. He was just taken straight to heaven, so he couldn't have resurrected from the dead. Yet the New Testament documents say he rose from the dead. Yet both belief systems have martyrs. So isn't this kind of thing just a wash anyway? No, it's not. Why? Well, there's a lot of differences between the New Testament martyrs and the Muslim martyrs of today. But let me just give you the one difference for our purposes. The Muslim martyrs don't have evidence that they're going to get the 72 virgins or whatever if they fly a plane into a building. They don't have evidence that Islam is true. They just have faith. But the New Testament writers were in a position to know whether Jesus had risen from the dead. They saw Jesus. They touched Jesus. They ate with Jesus. They verified with their own senses that Jesus had risen from the dead. You see, many people will die for a lie they think is the truth. Nobody will die for a lie they know is a lie. And the New Testament martyrs were in a position to know whether it was a lie or not, and they went to their deaths anyway. You can't get better evidence than that unless you were there yourself. Now, again, there's a lot more in the book, but let me sum this whole thing up and get to your questions. We have early eyewitness, embarrassing, excruciating, expected, and extra biblical testimony. There's 10 or 4 more reasons in the book that you can look up. And so what we're saying here, the New Testament's historically reliable. It's fact, not fiction. If it says Jesus said it, then Jesus really said it. If it says Jesus did it, then Jesus really did it. Now, I'm not saying it's inerrant at this point. The book goes into details on why we believe in inerrancy, but you don't need inerrancy to show that Christianity is true. If the major events of the New Testament documents are really historical, Christianity follows. So the whole argument, and again in the book it's in more detail, but these are the main points. Does truth exist? The answer is yes. It's self-defeating to say it doesn't exist. Does God exist? Yes. What are the 3 arguments we went through? Cosmological, teleological, and moral. There are other arguments as well, but those are the big 3. Are miracles possible? Why? How do we know they're possible? Because God exists, and the greatest miracle has already occurred. That's a good point, sir. When people say I don't believe in miracles, I always say, look around, you're living in one. This universe is a miracle. Came into existence out of nothing. If the first verse of the Bible is true, every other verse is at least possible. And we've got good evidence the first verse is indeed true. Is the New Testament reliable? Yeah, we just went through the evidence for that.